Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Just if you want to raise your hand if you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Look, you're all very, very welcome this evening to what I'm just pleased to be able to welcome Declan Devlin here for our talk on Chraobh, Surnames and Townlands. My name's Chraobh Coyle. I'm the Cultural Officer of Stewartstown Harps. And Declan, who's the Irish Language Officer on the Council, is going to be talking about the theme of the surnames and townlands in our locality. We've covered this on our club social media over the past year. Declan's a native of Moneyglass in County Antrim, and he's contributed a great deal of research into local landscapes in Mid-Ulster. One paper in particular for the Journal of Irish Archaeology, produced with Paul Logue, looked at landscapes of hunting and assembly in the north of Ireland, with Chraobh being one of the 3 case studies. So I'm sure I speak for everyone here this evening in saying that I'm really looking forward to hearing more of Declan's insights on surnames and townlands in our locality. Just before we begin, there's just a wee bit of housekeeping. I've muted all the participants apart from the co-hosts, Declan and I. This is merely to stop any background noise from interfering with the talk. Towards the end of the talk, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. But in the meantime, please use the chat function on Zoom. If you wish to ask a question or wish to speak at that stage towards the end, just please make yourself known to me and we'll collate the questions and I'll maybe turn the mute off at that stage. Our club, Stewartstown Harps, are planning to record this talk as part of Seachtain na Gaeilge. And Declan will be spotlighted, which means that he'll be taking up most of the screen when he is talking. So most people will not be seen. So by all means, feel free to switch your camera off if you don't want to be featured on the recording. So I think we can make a start at this stage. That's enough from me. And I'm very happy to pass over to Declan. So Declan, you're very welcome. And
yeah, good morning. And we'll just
switch this over to you.
Yeah.
Let's see, spotlight, pin, make host. There you go.
All right. Now I just have to do this, I think. So that you should be able to see that slideshow there now. Can you see that, Carol?
Yep, I can see that. Can everybody else see that? Yep, that's great.
Yeah, good. If I can figure out how to start this thing now. And I'll let there's people waiting to get in here. So, well, you can do that. I think.
I can do that,
yeah. Slideshow, here we go, from the beginning. So, you're waiting for a couple more there, Carol, are you?
Yeah, there's just a few more. Just give me a wee minute and I'll try and get
yeah, no worries. Yeah.
I'm not able to let them in. Declan, I wonder, can you?
All right, I can. No, it's coming up on my screen here. I think I can do that.
If you just let them in, because
yeah. Admit all. There we go. Kieran Fee, Chris Coyle, and Sheila Wiley. That's them now, Carol.
That's great. So I think we're ready to make a start. Welcome to anybody who's just arrived. I'm just going to mention we've got Declan O'Devlin here from Mid-Ulster Council. He's an Irish Language Officer. And Declan this evening's going to talk about Tír Faoi Chealt, a hidden land, and with a focus on Chraobh, the surnames and townlands of Chraobh. So over to you, Declan.
Thanks, Carol. Okay, so Nish Seachtain na Gaeilge. This is Irish Language Week, so Chraobh Liggas as Curru Hortu, Lorch and Shaw Nacht, agus, oh, then you want Ella, Frank Mays, so Shannon then you Jerena Hanishta Sulocum. So anyway, so this is our National Irish Language Week. We've all been very busy around the book, doing this and doing that and having talks. We're talking to Cahill earlier there. I was giving a talk last night, and there's another one going in English tonight too, and there's one Coleland's having one as well. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it's great to see all the interest. Every year it just seems to get more and more. People seem to be getting involved, and especially to see the clubs getting involved is brilliant. It's one of the most hopeful signs this last few years is how the local clubs have really stuck into to promote the Irish language, and there's been some great projects around the country, and it only seems to be getting stronger. So anyway, Tír Faoi Chealch. The reason this is the title I give it when we give a talk similar to this one for Frank and Aidan. There's another one. Paul, just going to let somebody else in here. Sorry, folks. We were, the idea of it was we were looking at our landscape, our anglicized landscape that we see before us. And I remember very clearly, you know, coming out of school and starting to learn Irish in school, and you learn all these words, and you suddenly start to see that there's a whole different history and a whole different landscape around you and things that you never noticed before. But it's like Irish is almost like a key that opens all this for you, and it's such a. It was a real kind of awakening for me, starting to learn Irish, just to find all this stuff, and since that I really just have been always curious about how the landscape, how the Irish language tells the story of our landscape around us, and lately I've started more and more. I was now working with Paul Logue, and great archaeologist, and that aspect of archaeology, bringing in the archaeology and bringing in the mythology and the folklore and all the local stories, and allying that to the study of our names and our place names. It seems to be paying dividends, and we seem to be finding out stuff now that has kind of been puzzling us in the past. So without further ado, I'm going to briefly just scan through some of these early slides here till we get to the meat and the bones. So you can see there the Lough Neagh in the middle of Ulster. This is Ulster sort of back the early Christian period. So we've gone back about 1,500 years. This is how the landscape was made up. And you see that western side of Lough Neagh is divided between the Argila in the south and the northern Iniel in the north. And that's a part of what we're looking at tonight, because a lot of our families and our places are to do with, there's an underlay of that older people there, Argila, and then before them even the Uli. So that if you see there, that's the Uli there that gives their name to the province in the Iron Age. And then the Argila defeat them in battle. All right, we've got some more people waiting to get in here.
Yeah, I think there's just a slight problem, I think, with the link, Declan. You know, it's just there's a delay with it or something.
Yeah, no, I've let 3 more in there now, so
great.
That's there we go. And then on the way, so it's like almost like a sequence, and in around that time of St. Patrick, where you have the Uli defeated first, and they're pushed across to the east. And then the Argila, and then eventually the Argila are dominated by the Northern Iniel, and the Northern Iniel from their kingdom here in Aileach, which is the greening of Aileach above Derry, above Burt, they're moving down over a period of a couple of 100 years, and around about the time of Brian Boru, so over about 1,000 years ago, they then forged this new kingdom of Tir Owen, the land of Owen. So Inishowen is where they start, and Owen is the kind of progenitor of the whole dynasty. And Owen's people then create Tir Owen, the land of Owen. And so it's kind of a progression from these three main population groups, and that's going to be reflected kind of in what we see when we're looking at family names, especially. So then, if we move on, it's frozen here. Okay, there we go. Don't need that so much. That's okay. I'm just going to let Vicky in here too. There we go. We don't need that, and we don't need that. We don't need that one. Right, so we're getting a picture here now. This is zooming on to the time of around about 1600, so the plantation of Ulster, and this is a map drawn by the invading English forces in Ulster at that time. So the Irish forces have just been defeated, and the English are starting to map. They're drawing up all the lands that they've just conquered. So you see a sort of 400-year-old map. It's actually not bad at all. You've got everything pretty much in the right place. And here you see is where we're looking at here in East Tyrone. We'll go on to the next one here. And so this is a zoom in on that map. And what we're looking at here is, there you can see, that's the black water there. And over here we have Dungannon, the castle on the hill. That's O'Neill's castle, destroyed after the wars. Over here, Fort Mountjoy, which is at that stage a brand new English fort, part of their conquest. And then there's this great woodland here, and that is basically to the north of Stewartstown. And under that, you see this church, and beside it, Chraobh. And this river, probably the Holy River. And over here, this is Loch Ruhan. And over here, Loch Chraobh, which is Stewartstown Loch, obviously now. And here is Stuchen, as Damien tells me to pronounce it. And so that's basically what you see there are the key landscape features that the English army are looking at here. These are how they're going to navigate around this district. There's Tullahogue just to the north there as well, you can see. We have a few more people looking in here. There we go. There we go. That's that. So and up to the north there in Glenconkyne, that's Ballinascreen, and Killetra, that's in around Maharfelt, and Tullach is Taulach. Taulach is Tamlacht, which is Koch, parish of Tamlacht, and then at the very top there, Toom. So that's the English fort on the west side of the Ban, and then on the east side of the Ban is the old. Sorry, that is actually one of the O'Neill forts. So all this western shore of Lough Neagh was heavily defended by O'Neill and by the O'Neills, and they created a number of forts up there during that war in around 1590 through to 1600, 1601, around about that time. So next, here we go. So that's the kind of setting the scene. And oh, I didn't show you those there. There's a list of a few of the main place names just off that map. So you've got Sukin, Tullahogue. You recognize all these anyway. I don't really need to explain the most of these. Loch Macreeva, Stewartstown Loch. Ardtray, obviously. Drumbo is Arbo. It's another name for Arbo. Drumbo. Kilchonna is Cooney, Townland. Clonogh obviously is where it's exactly what it is. Kilchraobh is Killycolpy, the wood of the Chraobh, isn't that right? And Toran, then the river, and Dowell, or an Owen War, that should be the big river or the Blackwater. And Sruhan Umulta, the Holy River. So that be river that runs down into the Washing Bay. So that's I just really need so many of these. 2 or 3 of these we'll be looking at tonight. Monterevlin, obviously Monterevlin, that's the old district from Stewartstown right up to the boundary of the people of Devlin. So they obviously the old Gaelic families lived in clan lands, and they were very well defined. And sometimes this is a kind of a naming pattern you see quite regularly, that you get that Munter people of. So in this case, Monterevlin, the people of Devlin. What else can you see there? Clonachary is, I don't think that name exists anymore, but that is the old area around from Clisland across into the mouth of the Blackwater. Bala Chin is the old name for, Cahill gave me a list of townlands to sort of look, we kind of wanted to look at tonight, where the club draws its support from. And a lot of them are sort of half and half between townlands and areas that were in the old Monterevlin district, from Stewartstown north and east, and the old Bala-Chin, which is the district of the O'Quinns, which is say from Eden Dark to up through New Mills and Bloom Hill, and up as far as Cloughfin Townland and around there. That district was the O'Quinn patrimony. And then you can see the rest, Ballinchlig, townland of the town of the clock, St. Patrick's Bell, I think, isn't that right, Carol?
Yeah, that's right.
Tullyneskin and Chraobh is the old Irish for Stewartstown, the original name. Clonogh and Stucken. And we just got to let James in here. There we go. So this is another map drawn up by the invading forces, by the English army, as it was then, as they came into Ulster after the Battle of Kinsale and the defeat of Kinsale. And you can see on this map here, we're looking at there's Lough Neagh. Now, a lot of these maps at that time, there was no convention of putting north at the top. So north, in this case, north is is down here at the bottom of the map. That's north, and south is at the top. So you've got to look at it reversed, upside the other way around. So this is still then obviously here is, you can see Armagh, and up here is Lough Inchilin, which is Magherafelt, up that country, South Derry. And this is the western shore, going from Coal Island down here up to the Boundary River here. And so you've got Clonachary, that old district of Clonachary is sort of Coal Island over into the Washing Bay. And then you've got Monterevlin, and you've got Revlin, Uachtra, Upper Monterevlin, and Revlin Uachtra, Lower Monterevlin. And in Irish, if you're saying upper, the direction is, that means it's to the south, and then lower would be to the north. That's generally how it works. So that's Stewartstown is in there. We'll zoom in now and get a look and see where we're at. This is a zoom in then to this other map. So what they're doing here is they're taking these, now these aren't townlands, although you'll see townland names in there. This is called a ballad beatty. And it's kind of like about a 3 townland unit mostly. Some of them, you know, because and a lot of you will probably know it. You get, and even in a townland, you'll get a 1/6 of a townland. You can get a 1/5 of a townland. You get a 1/3 of a townland, or a 1/4 of a townland, or half a townland. It's kind of all different ways of dividing up a district. And so what we have now is these modern townlands, and they're basically coming from what you see in front of you there. These are these kind of large, slightly larger districts, about 2 or 3 townlands usually. And then some of them, the townland name comes through and becomes a modern townland. And not all of these kind of survive right to the present day, but some of them do. But if you look there, you can see, I'll take you through it here if you watch closely. That's
So, Declan, just to put it in a bit of context, this is really from the early 17th century, really early plantation, isn't it?
Yeah, this is 400 years ago.
400 years ago. So I'm just looking at the very top there, the townland Mullach Moyle, which is where the pitch is situated. You know, the harps pitch. So, and then there's familiar ones like Ballygittle, Mullintain, Lettercleary, Kilcooney, and
yeah. So this is the first look you're getting at the detail for your district. So there you go. As Cal says, that's Mullach Moyle. That's Tullylig. So it survives. Gortakill is gone now. It's as Parker's Farm, I think it's called now. Gortakill.
Yeah.
So it's the field of the church, and we'll come to that in a minute, where the church might be. Mullintain is still there, isn't it? It's the bottom of the street in Stewartstown, yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's there. So there you see the loch. That positions you there at Loch. There's Loch na Craobh there. This one is an important one here. That's where the castle is at the top of the loch. That's Fiche. And Fiche is one of these words. It's a key word in place names because Fiche is the green or the lawn in front of a Gaelic castle or fort. So a high status person living there, they have to have a Fiche because you need somewhere for hurling. So this is the start of the GA in Ireland here. Basically, this is where the pitch was back in the day, 400 years ago. It's not just, it's a place for outside the castle where everyone's meant to come and congregate. If there's games going on, they go on there. If there's horse racing, all of that kind of thing, feasting, all sorts of things goes on there on the Fiche. It's where kings and lords are being kings and lords at. So do you know that that's an important place? And that's where the castle then, which was probably, Paul thinks anyway, the archaeological suggestion archaeologically is that there was a Gaelic tower house or a Gaelic castle there before the plantation castle. It's definitely around the loch and on the Chraobh, obviously there from the period before the plantation, so there's an really interesting landscape that we studied there in that paper that we talked that Cal mentioned earlier, in around and Craobh. And then you've got Killymurphy. Killymurphy, it's written there because that is Murphy is an anglicization of a Gaelic name, Macmurphy. And the Macmurphy were an old Ulster family, anglicized to Murphy. So the northern or the Ulster Murphys aren't O'Murraghus for the most part, they're Macmurraghs. But that's just one of these things that we talk about, the things that are hidden from us now because we've lost a lot of our, lost the way to tell a lot of our history and our even our own family names and things. So it's important to get all this stuff back again. And then moving on there, we've got Lettercleary is there. That's Dungormal there. Drumgormal now, I think it is. Ballygittle's over here. And that's Cahill, the one you were asking about earlier. That's Drumcairn.
Drumcairn, yeah.
Yeah, that's Dooncorran here.
Dooncorran. Yeah.
So you notice there, it's not the cairn there anyway. Mm-hmm. So that sows the doubt initially there too, Kilcooney. Mm-hmm. So you see a few of those things happen there. We'll go into more detail on them just in a wee second. We don't need that one. That's just general. So a few things there. We want to have a look at these. Yes, let's have a look at a couple of these just to show you what's going on with anglicization. So Donna Henry or Hendry, it really doesn't. Is there a correct form of what we have in English? The English language, just speaking linguistically, has a tendency to drop D's in like this. The surname Henry is Hendry. If you go up towards Coleraine direction, there's a lot of Hendrys instead of Henrys. And that's just because there's a tendency in some places that this D will insinuate itself. It's just a thing, a quirk of the English language. So Donna Henry is probably the more exact, if you're going back for the Gaelic version of it. And there's the old Irish form of it there, Donach Anre. And this is from an early Saint Fanre, and this is the Donach, the Church of. So that's actually, when you see Donach, like Donach Moor and Donach Henry and Donach Risk, these are churches. That place named Donach only appears on the Patrician mission or the mission of St. Patrick. So you know that that's a church that was set up as part of St. Patrick's the first early Christian mission in Ulster. And Patrick was in the district. We know that from his writings and from things that are written about him. And we know that he established a number of these churches because it's written at that time that he did this. And Donagh Henry is one of those churches. Cluan is a word you get in church sites a lot too. For some reason, Cluan is one of these words with gort that seems to be reserved for church use. And it seems to identify an area belonging to the early church. Cluan O Meadow of the Yew Tree. There's the one we had fun finding out there. Mousetown. People used to ask us what Mousetown was, and for a long time I couldn't figure it out. Mullach no Luchog was the Irish that the local people told the map makers in the 17 and 1800s, when Irish was still spoken in East Tyrone. They told them that Mullach no Luchog was the name of the place. What it actually looks like is that's Mullach no Luchog is a misunderstanding when the knowledge was lost of Mullach Mo Luog, and Smolua was a very famous early medieval saint in Ireland. And there's variations occur of his name. I'll show you them in a minute. Here's one that just changed today. Sherrigrim. It's the west of the town, isn't it? West of Stewartstown, Sherrigrim.
Yeah.
When I was looking at the early form.
Yeah. It's actually adjacent to Donagh Henry, like it's on that
Yeah.
side. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was looking at I had gone before with Chraobh, meaning Bitter Ridge, Chraobh. But when I looked at the earlier forms of it, I thought this one looked more likely to be it anyway. Shar is an old word for a corran or a sickle. And Sickle Ridge to me made a bit more sense than Bitter Ridge, because you can imagine that it seemed, say if it's a good quality land, I don't know the place, but if it's good quality, dry, high ground, then it would be a good land for cultivation. So you could go for that. Or maybe it's the shape of it. Cathal, you'd probably be best to.
Yeah, well, Sherrigrim would be high. It's on a height. It's on a height, like, so it would make. Sense.
Some of these places like that, actually, they're being figurative. Like they'll say a place looks like a sickle, but it's just because of the shape of it, rather than having to do. So they're not being literal at all. So you had to kind of nearly look at the place and see what it looks like once you've got there. There's one there that causes a lot of debate locally. This is my opinion. I'm fairly confident it's Dura an Lochan, because there is the features are there for it. The small lake kind of drained now that the Holy River runs through it, I think. Yeah, just back in off the Washington Bay. Not everybody agrees with me, and that's fair enough, because some of these things we just don't know. But that's the one I'm going for anyway. This one here is an interesting word, Tumfer. How do you say that, Cal?
Tumfer.
Yeah.
Tumfer.
Yeah. There's an old word in Irish, umcher, which means to throw a throw or a cast. And this is one of the ones that Queen's University doesn't really hedge their bets on it. They don't go for one. But we'll see. I'll leave that actually because we'll come back to that in a couple of slides and you'll see what I'm talking about. As we will with Tullaleg and Doris. So here we go anyway. So this is the start of your Townlands anyway for that the club draws upon. So some of them are simple enough. Ruhan, red land, just very little debate about that one. There's not really anything else it can be. Ballygittle, that's an unusual name there. Now that name doesn't exist outside, I think, maybe Dublin or Leinster. There might be families of kettles. It's anglicised kettle, but it's an old Irish name, O'Gittle.
Yeah.
O'Kittle.
I think there could be a link to Liscattle. Liscattle's it's an adjacent townland. I
think definitely the family seem to have been, exactly. The family seem to have been here for some reason. A lot of families in Gaelic society would have been professional in one way or another. They would have had a craft or a trade, or they would have worked for the church, or they would have been involved in some sort of service to the kings or whatever, and they all had different roles in society. So there was movement around, maybe the family came to look after a church or whatever, there could have been some reason for them to be there. And then maybe family just dies out after that. This was an interesting one I thought here. Ballywullen is, this is actually one of the surnames you gave me, Cahill.
Cullen. Yeah.
So the O'Quilline are an old Ulster family who were one of these. Well, we talked about families having roles in society. The O'Quilline, or the Cullens, were what we call an Erenach family. They were a family who looked after church property. They weren't necessarily making priests and bishops and whatever, but they were more a lay family. But one of their responsibilities was they had to take care of certain churches. And like, for example, if you know this area where I am at here, Ballascullion, there are two Ballascullions, one on each side of Loch Beg, far Ballascullion and near Ballascullion, or big Ballascullion and wee Ballascullion. It kind of all depends where you're standing. But the O'Scullion, or the Scullions, were the family who took care of the old church on Church Island in Ishtija, and they did that for 1,000 years. And the O'Cullens or the Cullens are the same. That was one of their roles. So you get a lot of them in Armagh around the church and the cathedral in Armagh and the different churches in the county. And they're obviously here in around.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, Declan, is that similar to Ballydonlia? Like Castle Caulfield?
Yeah, exactly like that. And the one we saw earlier, Cal, too, Ballychin. These are all just, Balla is just used in these cases as a way of, you just put it in there with the family name, and that then that is the hereditary lands of that particular family. And sometimes a family will be, they'll be doing well, and they'll maybe have 2 or 3 places named after them, maybe even in different counties and stuff, because they're being taken there and placed there, or they have to be there for a certain reason, military or service or whatever. So there's the one we had earlier there. Castle Farm is.
Could I jump in here?
Sure, Frank, go ahead.
I live in Ballywullen, which is always pronounced, as far as I can work out, Ballywullen, not Wolan. And I'm wondering whether your suggestion of the O'Cullens, Donovan suggested, or the Honor Survey original suggested, O'Follen as a possible name.
Yeah.
For that. As I say, I live in that townland, and there is a subdivision within the townland known as the Mullen. And I'm wondering whether that was the original meaning of the thing, Little Summit.
I think But you're saying there, but the pronunciation, Ballywillan,
Yeah.
would rule out Mullen or Whalan, anything like that. Mullan. And the fact that this family is in the area and the earlier forms of the name would give you this. I think actually, I don't have it in front of me now, but there are earlier forms which tend to support this one more than anything from Mullen or Whalan. And certainly Ballywillan is close in Irish. When you're speaking Irish, if you can see there in the middle there, Frank, you see this is the genitive form, so it's O'Cullen is the surname. But when you use the genitive form of the O'Cullen, it becomes A Cullen. So you're starting to get closer, Ballycullen, starting to get closer to the modern pronunciation there.
Having said that, it also supports your interpretation and the fact that there's an ancient monastery in the townland as well. So if they're the keepers of the church, that would fit in with that.
I feel like, I mean, like I said at the start, hardly any of these am I going to be definitive about. There's always room. I've been proven wrong plenty of times in the past, and I don't ever think it's with place names. You should ever be insisting that you're 100% correct, because there's, you know, there are other bits of information come to light at different times, and it would be silly, I think, to be too firm about these things. So it's always good to debate. But as far as Ballywillan is concerned, I'd be fairly confident of that one. That's O'Cullen, or the Cullens.
Right.
Culletunny, recess of the fox. There must have been some story about that at some stage to have that name, but I'm not aware of anything. It's Shonach, meaning a fox, or Madarua, Madu of any sort, Ku, meaning a hound. These names occur again, or these words occur again and again in place names. And it's not as always apparent what's being referred to, but sometimes there's an allusion to it. Sometimes you get a local story that tells you what is going on. There's a fantastic place name up on the mountain behind Mahara called Altavidavaki. And you have to practice that one to be able to say it right. Altavidavaki. And what it means is it's not a townland, it's a part of a townland. And alt is the Irish word for a ravine, a steep-sided glen. Alt and Vadivaki. So it's now, if you've been to the Gaeltacht in East Ulster and West Ulster, they would say Altawadiwaki. But in speech of Derry and Tyrone, it was Altavadivaki. The Lame Dog's Glen is how it translated. And there was a big, long local story that was recorded in the 1800s of how a wolf came to a door, and the wolf had this was during a storm in the wintertime, and the poor woman that lived there, she was snowed in and couldn't get into town and was stuck in her house. But this wolf started scraping at the door, and it ended up, to cut a long story short, it had a thorn in its paw, and it had gone septic, and she pulled it out and cleaned it up, and it kept bringing her then, as long as the storm lasted, a hare or a rabbit or whatever, and leaving it at the door to see her through the rest of the storm, and she was saved and it was saved. So that's the story of how Altavadivaki got its name. And you can imagine there was some local story that made sense of this place named Culletunny. So we kind of ended up talking too much as usual, so I'm going to have to run on through these a bit quicker. Drumnagullen now, Drumnagullen, Holly Ridge of the Hollies, Drumnagullen.
It's just yeah, I'm just going to interject. That's my original townland where I was brought up in Drumnagullen, and you mentioned, in a previous talk about the Chraobh Hills. The Chraobh Hills would be, in that area, like, so which everyone would be familiar with.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to get out. So maybe when we get to the end of
Yeah,
this lockdown, we can get out
absolutely.
and see some of these places. It would be a nice project, Cahill. If we could
Would be.
hire
Yeah.
a bus, go on tour,
Yeah.
be lovely. There's the one there you were asking about earlier, Drumcairn. And like I started off too when we started looking at the Stewartstown area as part of the study that you talked about earlier. Like it looked fairly obvious to me that it was Drumcairn, the ridge of the Cairn. Uh, but the more and more I looked at it, and the more we started bringing in local history, and we found out about the history of the old Devlin and how yeah, like I said before, a lot of the families, and we'll just do Devlin now because we're talking about this one. The Devlins were a family who were part of that O'Neill alliance, the Kinneal Owen, who created Chraobh on the land of Owen. And the old Devlins, as they were originally, the Devlins were what they called Fear Cairn, the true soldiers, along with the MacCathwell and the I think it was the O'Donnelly as well, the Donnellys, the MacCathwells who became Campbells. So the anglicised Campbells of Tyrone and Armagh aren't Campbells from Scotland; they're MacCathwell, and those three families were key. I think it was those three families. They were key clans that gave the foot soldiers to the northern armies, the O'Neill armies, and that was their role in society to do that. And the more we investigated, I ended up finding a poem about the cairn or the soldiers. Cairn is, why they anglicised it, cairns there, it means soldiers, Gaelic soldiers, foot soldiers. They gathered together on Drumgormal, as it is now, Dunformwell on that hill.
Mhm.
And it was a rallying point for them. And so now I'm of the opinion that it's more likely that Drumcairn, which you saw on the map area with the two syllables, Drumcairn, is probably Ridge of the Cairn, or the soldiers, the old Devlin troops. Because I've found this in other places. If you go to different Gaelic landscapes, you'll find a place where basically they practiced being soldiers. They practiced movement on the field and how to go into battle and things like that. And they had places where they always did that. Every little district was the same, because unfortunately, warfare was such a part of the Middle Ages, and basically that's what everybody did. So that's what we're going with there. Again, it could be that we're wrong, but that's what I think it is anyway. This one here, actually, I've changed this one since the talk I gave the last time. And I think I said that time I thought it was Gorta Tra and Sra being good land along a water course, which seemed to make sense because it's to the south side of Stewartstown Loch. But having looked at that again and thinking about the way it's pronounced, I think it's Gorta Tre, Cahill, is it?
Gorda Tray. Yeah, Gorda
Yeah,
Tray.
and Sre would be, that pronunciation would be better for that word there. Sre meaning a mill race.
Yeah,
It's also
I think
written SRAE, and if you look at Stewartstown Loch, it drains out to the east along a good flowing stream which goes fairly straight, which I'm guessing maybe was at one stage in the medieval times used as a mill race. So it just is a possibility. Again, that one's not hard and fast. We can't say for sure it's not one or the other, but that's the one I think is probably more likely.
I know, and I think just at this stage, I'll just mention about that. There's a website, Place Names NI, which I'm not sure if Paul Logan's been working with that as well, Queen's University, but there's a few mentions to sources like MacAleer and the Ordnance Survey and whatever from the 1800s. So you get a couple of different definitions, don't you, throughout the centuries.
Yeah, you get different people looking at it, and then I think there's never been such a good time probably to be looking at this stuff, because now, because like I'd be sitting here. Oh, sorry, there's somebody looking in. Will we let Mark Shields in?
Yeah, go on ahead.
When when you look at those people who were working, say in the 1830s, John O'Donovan was working. This guy came up from, where was John? Kilkenny, I think. A scholar of Irish and a man who knew his history, but he knew the version he'd got in Kilkenny, which is a long way from the middle of Ulster. And his type of Irish that he spoke was different. He didn't have the internet. Neither did Pat McAleer, actually, either, So everybody in the past has been, to an extent, working in the dark, working with whatever kind of research books they have, maybe one or two books. And in a case of Donovan, looking at manuscripts and trying to get people in Dublin to send him up a manuscript when he was here, to see if he could find and nowadays we can just click on, and half of those manuscripts are uploaded by universities as free books online, and there are websites like that Queen's Place Name website, and we can go and find all that information. We can cross-reference it with archaeology, and we can do all these wonderful things that we couldn't do before. So it's a good time now to be reevaluating a lot of these place names, And it's not really to cast any aspersions in anything anybody's done before. It's just that new information comes to light. It gets easier to find these things, and you should never say, "That's it, we're finished." There's no more discussion of this. So we better hurry up, because I ended up. So Gort de Clochan. Clochan is anything made of stone. Cloch is a stone, and a clochan is something stone. So it can be a stone building, it can be a castle, but it also can be, and it's probably the main meaning of it in the language, is stepping stones across a stream. Gort de Clochan is beside, what do you call the old church? Donna, it's not Donchanye, is that what it's called? Donachan. There's Don Henry's church. It's beside one of the old Don Henry. Yeah, it's beside one of the old churches, and so it's a Gort is the glebe land. Gort is the Irish word actually for glebe. That's the word we use in Irish for glebe. Glebe being the land set aside for the priest for his horse and whatever else he needed. Maybe a couple of horses or whatever, so he has somewhere to graze that. So that's a kind of a field that belongs to the church. And I forgot to mention actually on Gorta Tre that on the last talk we did there, somebody mentioned about Sinclair's hardware store in Stewartstown Street. And I had said that we were looking, for archaeological, the only thing kind of missing from the picture that we could see around Stewartstown, there didn't seem to be a chapel anywhere. And you'd expect a chapel. And Gort is a glebe field. So Gort de Tre would be the obvious place for it. And then somebody local said, yes, at that back, down the back of Sinclair's is they have been finding, they have, for a number of years or whatever, have been finding human remains in that area down the back of that garden in there. So it looks like that was an old graveyard, possibly. Then you would imagine then if the graveyard was there, there was a church site there too somewhere. So again, that's local information, local knowledge, helping to put the picture together, and use that with place names there. It can be quite powerful tool actually to bring these new discoveries to light. So presumably that's what we're getting there, Gorta Tre. Gorta Clochan, stepping stones, Lagmorton. Now, Patrick McAleer had something about, I noticed something about wet land or bad land or something like that from Murnia or something, which is not something that I don't know where I got it now. I haven't seen it anywhere. But what is very common, and actually last night I was just talking about the tomb place names, and we have a townland here in Toom called Carmorn. It's just outside Toom and near Carrigan Chapel, and it's an ancient story which was a hugely popular medieval story in Ireland called The Death Tale of Aughie MacMurdo. And Aughie is the guy that gives his name to Lough Neagh. And he was he was the king of the district that Lough Neagh is meant to have been. You know that story, I'm sure you've heard the story, or some of you've heard the story. There's meant to be a city under Lough Neagh, a flooded city. And the fishermen sometimes see these round towers and see this. Well, that story is a very ancient one, and it's actually the story of how Aughie's people were drowned to create when Lough Neagh formed and burst forth. And the only survivor was Aughie's daughter, called Lee Ban. And after 300 years under the loch, in the form of a mermaid, she appeared to the first Christians, the monks, and was brought ashore and baptized. And when they baptized her, they called her Muireann. And Muireann is born of the sea. And that's why they chose the name for her. So she stopped being Liban and then she was Muireann. So Cairn Morn in Tomb is Muireann's cairn. And I think Lag Morn here is possibly this name as well. Wouldn't be again anyway certain about this, but it's at least it's a defendable theory at the least point, you know. So Letter Cleary is there beside the old church of St. Cuana. So it's the Clerics Hillside. It's probably St. Cuana that's being referred to there. Mulchmuel, the Bear Hill. What time is it, Cahill? I think we're...
Oh, it's coming up to just 5 to 9 there, like, so.
Yeah, I need to get the skates on here.
Because I think we're going to look at surnames, aren't we, as well?
Yeah, we're going to run straight to them now. Here we go. So we'll get through these and then we can have some questions and stuff. I'll just finish up after we get these surnames in. So Armour, this was an interesting one for me because I'd never really thought of this name before. It's Old French, and the Armour in Old French, I've written here down for myself in case I make a mistake. Armour is Armour is Old French for an armourer, somebody who takes care of a knight's armour going into battle, or prepares it and makes it and keeps it right or fixes it or whatever. So that's an Old French name. So a number of these names there actually didn't turn out. I thought that, because usually there is, you know, there'd be a number of specifically English or Scottish names. What there are 3 or 4 Old French names, which is really interesting, and they're obviously coming from the Norman period, when the French, actually they talk about the Norman invasion. It was actually French people rather than English people for the most part who were involved in that. This is what I'm talking about. This was the Norman invasion on the island of Britain, and then after 50, 100 years, when it happens here, it's kind of the same thing. So you get a mixture of different peoples who are sort of Welsh or French or English, who are all part of that mix. And then what we get here, we don't get that so much in Ulster. We only get a couple of families in Ulster who are from that original 12th century period, 11th, 12th century period, and most of it is a kind of delayed thing where it comes in around 1600. Those families later on, it didn't make much sense there, but I'm trying to get. I
suppose you're thinking about the likes of Fitzgerald and that sort of name, aren't you?
Well, we see one down here. We see Dylan. No, I couldn't find any. Like Dylan, I couldn't find any. A lot of names that appear initially to be from somewhere else are actually anglicized Irish names, and we'll get a couple of them in a minute. But Dylan is French as well. So Armour is French. Dylan is Old French. And I think one of the other ones later on is too. So I just thought that was interesting, you know, that you get these French. So it's not just, we always tend to think in this country it's just either Irish or English. It's not, you know, we get German and you get French too coming in, and it's an interesting mix, and it's fascinating when you get into the different ways that languages overlap each other. There's Campbell. Campbell was on my list here. So Mac Cahwil It was first anglicised and still in some places McCall or Call or Caulfield, names like that, all used for MacCathwell as anglicised names. So anglicised is like when people say mostly in the 1800s, but earlier than that too, they're making that switch from using using Irish language to using the English language. And as part of that switch then in the language they're using, they're adopting English names. So they find a name that suits in English or somebody gives it to them. Sometimes they just sort of translate their own name, or sometimes they take an existing English or Scottish name and use it instead. And Campbell is one of these. So they use the name Campbell that exists, a Scottish Gaelic name, but they're actually MacCathwell. MacGillachole, an old Donegal name. Anytime you see that Gilla in his family name, it means it's a church family. So they're servants of a saint or followers of a saint. In this case, Saint Cole, anglicised or Latinised Comgal. Saint Cole, an old early Ulster saint from around the time of Columcille. There's our O'Quillan from Ballycullen, Ballywallen. O'Devlin, we did. Dylan, Norman French. O'Donnell, one of the old Tyrone families as well, the Kinnelone families. And they're from their patrimony is Ballydonnell, which is Castle Caulfield. Mm-hmm. So Castle Caulfield is the old O'Donnell territory. O'Gallachore is a Donegal name, and it translates as help. Core is help from abroad, foreign help. So that's the Gaelic families who were coming to fighting wars in Ireland as what they called Gallowglass soldiers. Gaelic from Scotland coming here and used in Irish armies by local lords, and O'Gallachore, I think, was one of them. Heron is an interesting one. O'Heron is a name on its own, but sometimes it masks an older Kinnelone name, O'Hararan, with the middle syllable falls out. So that O'Hararan, or anglicised sometimes Haran as well as Heron, is an old name. You get it in County Derry, North Derry, a lot up around Clady and Feeney. There's a place called Stradbally Heron, and that's the old district where that family originated. I think they were connected in a lot with they seem to be in one of the early families who kind of were overtaken by the O'Neills and O'Keans. Hughes is another one of these families. Hughes is a Welsh family, I think, but in Ireland and in Ulster, they tend to be this family, O'Hay, which anglicizes. They adopt the name Hughes, but they're not actually Hugheses. They're O'Hay. And if you went into Mayo, that becomes Hayes, but in the north it's anglicized Hughes. And they come from actually the wife's people. They're connected into the Hugheses down in Middletown. So that sort of Middletown, Caledon direction is the old district where the Hugheses were from, or the O'Hay, and they were an important family there too. O'Kinnedy, didn't get a chance to do much on O'Kinnedy, but I do know it's one of the big Munster surnames. And Brian Boru, the famous High King, Brian Boru as they call him, I think his people with that O'Kennedy family are part of that dynasty. This just from memory, so don't quote me. We need to move on, don't we? So here we go. We'll fly through the rest of these. O'Laverty, big West Tyrone, Kinnelone family, or Chraobh, all the old families. They actually for a time were kings along, because O'Neill became the king, recognized king-making family, but before that there were 2 or 3 other families who also could have held the kingship, and the O'Lavertys at one stage were in and around there too. Logan, another name that we associate with Scotland, but in the case of Irish families, this O'Loughlin is one of the families. You get a lot of family names in Ireland that you see families that were around the Midlands and Leinster and south on east Munster, all those good lands that during the Norman invasion, the old lords and kings, Gaelic families in those districts, they were cleared, they were defeated, they had to go out. Those families had to find a new role for themselves, and the O'Loughans were one of those families. So they were no longer kings of, I think the place was called Líne agus Galenga, I've written down here somewhere. And round about Meath was their they were lords of those districts. When the Normans came, they lost out and they had to go and find something else to do themselves. So they put themselves into service in Gotlands and Ulster and Connacht and places that hadn't been overtaken by the Normans. So there's another one exactly the same. Low surprised me today as well, because Low is, when you first go to look it up, it comes up as a German name, and then some Scottish versions of it and things like that too. It's actually MacLoy. MacLua is an old Ariela. You remember at the very start we looked at those early dynasties. Ariela was the old grouping before the Kinealone came in. So that's taking you back 1,500 years, 2,000 years in this district. Those MacLoys, so they're not actually Lows, they are MacLua or MacLoy. Another one the same as Mitchell, which I always thought to be Mishtil, which is from the Old French. It's actually Michel. That's where the Mitchell comes from. But in Ulster, it's Omwail Vihal, Mulvahal. If you Omwail Vihal. And that is anglicized as Mitchell. So again, like I'm saying to Cal earlier, you can't be 100% sure of any of these, but you just go on. Usually this is what happens to local Gaelic families.
It's very interesting because I suppose Mulvihill is a very popular surname in Leinster, like, you know, in particular in the southern provinces, like, but, you know.
Yeah. Like I still get surprised too by some of these, the thing about this is it is fairly well documented. Like there are a number of people who've worked in genealogy over years, and it was a huge study in Ireland right through the Middle Ages, because if you didn't know who your father and grandfather were, you couldn't inherit the land and take over and stuff. So you had to know these things. So it is fairly well documented when you could look for it, that these, you know, the change that, and sometimes like you could see the place we were at the weekend there, you could see it in gravestones. Family, the name Bradley around Mahara, big name. You can see it on the gravestones. It's Bradley, and then you go back a couple of generations, O'Brolahan. And if you look at the Rogers there too in Ballinascreen, it's Rogers, and then you go up and up a line, and it's McCrory. You know, and you can see it happen to a lot of families that way. Anyway, we better move on. O'Donnell is an interesting one too, because O'Donnell you think is like Lords of Donegal, Kings of Donegal, the O'Donnell, but there actually is a local O'Donnell. There are 4 or 5 O'Donnells in Ireland, which aren't necessarily all the same family. It's just anyone who's called Donald who did well and formed a dynasty. That's the surname that comes from it. So there is a local family, O'Donnell, as well in East Tyrone, who are again an Aryelan family and were once kings of the district of East Tyrone. So there's Tully O'Donnell, you know that townland, Tully O'Donnell, over by the Rock.
Yes.
That direction.
Yes. Yeah.
That's them. So that's them there, you know. O'Neill, don't think we need to talk about that because we always end up talking about the O'Neills. So we'll give the O'Neills a rest tonight. Then this one Park, I didn't get any, really I found it difficult to find anything much on Park. And I hope somebody can put me right on it. But the only thing I found was Park and Parker seemed to be, they're old French terms, again, Norman French. and park and parker seem to be the same thing. It's somebody who looks after a park, and a park is like land has been parkland. This land has been set aside for the king and for hunting, and it contains herds of deers. And so the person who looks after that is it's a high status role in society from the Middle Ages. So it comes from the French word park. But actually, the word park in Irish is the same. They all come originally from the same Indo-European root word. So again, interesting story there. I don't know if there's a connection with Parker and Park in Steer. So that's for somebody who probably knows more than I do about that. But it'd be interesting to see if that was the case. Quinn, one of the big names. We looked at that earlier there. Ballyquin or Ballyoquin. Quinn is that area, as I said, from Edendork up to Cloughin. Rooney, a really interesting name. The O'Runa were what we call a learned family. They were a poet family, bardic poets, and their job then would have been to keep the histories alive for the royal families in the different kingdoms of Ireland, and to write the poems and to do all of that sort of stuff. So the O'Runa, that was one of their roles in society. Rush, I found 2 or 3 versions of Rush, but I kind of knew this one already. In different parts of Ireland, different names have become Rush. Here in Ulster, it tends to be Lochray, because the Irish word lucher, meaning a rush, looks like this word. So it's what we call a mistranslation. So any Lochrays that were anglicising their names would have maybe said Rush, because it's similar to Lucher. Whereas actually what Lucher does mean is white or pure. So that's the context of the name. Talbot is another one of these old French names. And I've written down here too. What does it mean again? Talbot. Oh yeah, the family of Talbot. They're an old family in Ireland. They come from way back around about 1200 from the Norman invasion. They were lords of Malahide in Dublin, the Talbot family, and I think they probably still have that manor there. And Talbots, where did I write that down at? It had a meaning in I've lost it now. I have to try and look that up. Oh, here it is here. Tal means to destroy in Old German, and bot is a message. So the whole thing means, where did I end up with that? The whole thing means messenger of destruction. So the Talbots are messengers of destruction. So you need to be watching them.
The other surname I didn't include there, and I'm just noticing there's maybe a few on the Zoom call, is Wiley. Do you know any origins of Wiley? Wiley?
No, but I'll check that one out and send you an email about it. Sure,
definitely, because it'll be another popular surname like in the area.
Yeah, I need to check that out. So that's basically one or two. I wanted to show a couple of wee things that we have here that I got today. And if we can just go through this quickly. Yeah, I wanted to show you this before we quit. This is, and I should have made it bigger. This is Ballyquin. I didn't do it, and I didn't do it big enough. But I could send these on to you, Cathal, anyway. Show some of these slides and things anyway for people. But it showed you. It's basically this was showing you. You know the Farloch and Edendork up here at what's the southern end? It's on the top of the map, but it's the southern end. So that's Farloch there, and Edendork is here. I think. There it is there. Edendork is there. And that's, see there, Ballyquin.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
And that's all Ballyquin, all the way up here to, there's Loughnacreva, Stewartstown there. So that's all Ballyquin up to here. So a lot of those townlands that you gave me, Lisskittle and Tullabeg and but there's different ones there you give me. There's Shergrim over there. Clergam, and so they were all in that old Ballyquin district. And there is Ruhan Castle, which was the seat of the O'Quinn. So the Quinns, the building that's standing there now is the castle the Stuarts built after the plantation of Ulster, but the Crannog is out there in the loch that belonged to the Quinns. And the Lake Island of the Crannog is out there, and this here, you'll see now, this castle is built in a large. Is it there? Yeah, that's it there. There's Ruhan Loch, there's the Crannog, there's the castle. I'm on the wrong screen here. There's the castle there, and this big circular enclosure around it is pre-plantation. So the castle's been plonked down into the middle of that big enclosure. And with the Crannog over there, and over here, another wee loch, which is now gone. And that is some kind of mound, that green dot, which is possibly inauguration. This is all the stuff we were finding today. And that green dot up there is where Stuchan Church was. So that's the site of the old church up there. So it's all kind of in this particular Ballyquin area. And there's the old sort of capital. The way Stewartstown was probably the old Devlin capital. This was the O'Quinn power base in here and around Ruhan Loch. So I thought that was worth mentioning tonight. And there's the man himself. Felemy Rua and Kinard. Felemy Rua of Kinard or Caledon, who was killed in the Crannog who was captured in the Crannog of Ruhan, the island of Ruhan Loch. In 1653, he was betrayed, and that's where he was. He had commanded the Ulster forces during the 1641 war, and was taken to Dublin and hung, drawn, and quartered. And he, in English, was known as Sir Phelim O'Neill, but he was in Irish known as Felemy Rua and Kinard. Felemy Rua of Kinard. And that'll do us unless anybody has a question.
And well, Kestigi Agav. Have you any questions, anyone? I suppose, I have mentioned that it's being recorded. So if you had any questions, you can relay them to me, and we can, get in touch with Declan. He's based in Mid Ulster District Council. So, but apart from that, if there's anybody who has an urgent question, if you wanna just even put in the chat box or raise your hand, we'll just give you this time to do that.
You see me there?
Yeah, is that Johnny? Johnny?
It's just
yeah.
Some ways thing I have in my head. The Gall Bogs, the back road of Cookstown, we call it the Gall Bogs there, going up the Grange Road, the way we go to Cookstown.
Yeah.
The Gall Bogs, there's no, it's not a town land, but it's only what it means or what it. It's just local name.
And how did you say that, John? Is the Gall Bog?
Oh, it's it's the back road we'd go to Cookstown. Anybody from Stewartstown, the five going through Cookstown town, it brings you in by the police station end. But anybody local, it's called the Gall Bogs, but I don't know anything about it.
It wouldn't be like I'm not that 100% sure of the area. I don't know it as well, obviously, as you would living there. But there's a townland there, the Outlands of Galvalley or something it's called. Mm-hmm. Would it be there? Is it there by any chance?
The road to Grange, the back road we call it Grange Road, is back to Cookstown, but there's just the Gall Bogs. It's local. It floods a lot down this boggy, and it's a wee road like that.
What townland is it in, John?
That's what I don't know.
It's in Anahone, I believe.
The what?
Frank, go on ahead, say that again, Frank.
It's in Anahone townland, I believe.
Anahone.
Which in the 17th century English sources is Anachtophane, which may refer to the coalfield.
Oh, I know that one, yeah. Yeah, I looked at that recently. That's well up that road. That's heading away up by Tullahog, isn't it? Heading towards Tullahog.
Yeah. It'll be the back end of Tullahog there.
Yeah. It's well out of this district, yeah.
Yeah.
Galbogs. Anachtophane, yeah. That's one I remember looking at that there a few weeks ago. Anahone is what it is now. Anach meaning a marsh, and Owen meaning the river that runs past it. There is a wee river, I can't remember the name of it, runs past the edge of that townland. And the old name then, Anach Duffin, is that family, O'Duffins, the Duffins, which places them in near Townlands, which is interesting. But that doesn't answer your question, John, of what the Gall Bogs means. The Gall. I'll have to think about that. And I can't give you one right off the head here now at the minute. But I'll have a look at that.
Belfast, the basketball team was St. Gall's,
Yeah.
West Belfast. So I don't know what. I don't know. I'm only.
Yeah. I'll come back to you on it.
Yeah.
I'll come back to you on it, maybe. Yeah.
Is there anyone else with any questions? Let's see. I'll just go through. Okay. Well, if that's all, I think we'll just like to thank Declan for giving a fascinating talk this evening about the surnames and townlands of Chraobh. And no doubt, we'll be very welcome whenever the lockdown's over to welcome him in the area. I know you've been before to the Chraobh Centre, I think, Declan, to give a talk with Frank and Aidan, on the perhaps on Townlands, was it Townlands?
It was, yeah.
It was, yeah. And just before I go, I think it's very important to mention that there was an excellent article that you wrote last year for the Journal of Irish Archaeology about the landscapes of hunting and assembly in the north of Ireland. And there were 3 case studies. One was in County Down, and another was Antrim, but the one obviously that I was fascinated by was on Chraobh, and you went into it in great detail, particularly about the poets, I think it was, who congregated in the area. That might have been something to do with the castle, or the activities that people.
It was because of the Chraobh site there in the loch. It seemed to draw all that activity to it. It turned out to be a fascinating place. That's what I mean. It's all almost hidden from us.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to think that
fun to go and start digging stuff up.
Absolutely, but to think back in the 16th century, people, poets were coming from all over Ireland to Chraobh, for their poetry, and I think it's really interesting, and it's great research that you've been doing in that respect. So I'd like to thank you for that, and thanks for coming along this evening. The talk has been recorded, so I'd just like to thank everybody for coming along this evening. And if you have any queries or whatever about Townlands, we're running a wee series on the club Facebook and Twitter feeds. I've been doing that myself over the past year. I think actually we do one a month really at the moment, and this month's is Gorda Tray, which Declan has just been talking about. Gorda Tray, which is just actually just at the back of Chraobh. So that's the townland for March. So without any further ado, I'd just like to wish you all a Banachdy the La Ela Faldric in a couple of days' time, as we're in St. Patrick's Week, and this is Seachtain na Gaeilge. So I wish everybody a good evening, and thanks very much for attending. So thank you.
Thanks,
All the best now.
All the best.
Right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah, no.
Shall I, Declan?
Nay.
Inte mig.
Let's see.